so delighted to see so many of you here in person. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules and days and being here with us for Nonprofit Day at the Capitol 2025. Yay! So we're thrilled for those of you that are here in person. We're also looking forward to those of you that will join us this evening from our social media channels. We have a very exciting day planned for you. And to start that off, I want to make sure that I acknowledge the M&A staff that are here, as well as the M&A staff that are not joining us in person today. They have worked so hard over the last couple months to get this event here today. You will know they are staff people by their tags. They say staff. You've already encountered some of them at registration. Most of the time, you're either seeing them in a virtual space or by email. So make sure to take some time today to say hello to the staff, but definitely want to certainly give them a round of applause before we get started. We're also really thrilled to be joined by our M&A board of directors that are here with us. If you are a board member, current or past, because I see somebody who is a past board member here as well, could you just stand so that we could acknowledge you? Thank you. I did not tell them we were going to do that, so surprise. All right. All of you have boards, so you know how critical they are to the success of our organizations, and I just wanted to make sure that we acknowledged the M&A board members that are joining us. If you haven't already noticed today, and we are celebrating, this is a big year for M&A. We are celebrating our 35th anniversary. Woohoo! Yes, 35. Also, inside your folders, if you hadn't have a chance to take a look at those, you'll find a letter from Governor Gretchen Whitmer recognizing our 35th anniversary. We want to give a big thank you to the governor for her continued support for Michigan's nonprofits. 35 years ago, M&A, originally known then as the Michigan Nonprofit Forum, was founded from a simple yet powerful question: what if? And that question was posed by the late Russ Mobby, who then was president and CEO of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation. This vision sparked the idea: what if? What would happen if nonprofits from around the state, regardless of their missions, came together in the spirit of collaboration and partnership? That vision led to the creation of M&A, and here we are today. We have grown into a leading force for advocacy and community building for the sector. As we gathered here today for M&A's annual Nonprofit Day at the Capitol, I'm reminded of just how far we have come since 1999 and how much further we are going to go when we are joined as a united sector. Nonprofit Day at the Capitol, for many of you who have been here before, and I see some familiar faces and I see a lot of new faces here, it brings together nonprofit leaders, you, advocates, you, and policymakers from across Michigan together in one room to raise awareness about the important work that our nonprofits are doing in every community across this great state. That's the important work you are all doing. We are here to share stories. We're here to hear from our elected officials. Most importantly, we are here to remind policymakers of the powerful impact that nonprofits make every single day in our communities. I'm looking forward to today's discussions, the connections we will make, and the progress we will achieve together. Your voices are incredibly powerful, and when they come together, the impact is undeniable. There's great strength in unity, and the power of our collective voice can drive meaningful change. So, before we begin, let's talk about a few kind of housekeeping and a quick reminders. In case if you haven't noticed, we have cameras in the room. M&A is recording in partnership with Detroit PBS this event. Of course, how could you miss those cameras, right? But don't worry, feel free to go about your day, maybe make sure your hair's in place, reapply the lipstick a few more times than you probably normally would. But they're just gonna mose around in the space with us and capture the essence of today. This event will be shown tonight on all of our channels and Detroit PBS at 6 p.m. We also have a photographer and videographer with us today. Jeremy Ross from J. Ross Communications, who is responsible, by the way, for many of M&A's videos that you see on our social media, is here. If you're interested in learning how to get your videos, he's right over there, front and center. Raise your hand, Jeremy. Shout out. All right.
Additionally, Ron, get ready. This is your moment in the spotlight, too. Ron Stratton is here capturing photos for today's events, which we will share a link to a Google Drive where you can access those photos from today, as well as some of the recordings. Lastly, and we've learned this from years past, we kindly ask that you use the exits that are on the side of this room just to keep the noise down. If you haven't been here before, this serves as the welcome center. So we expect to have kids groups and anybody else that's planning to take a tour of the Capitol today. They start here at the Heritage Hall. So we know that sometimes the building can get a little lively. All right. I'd like to now welcome Michael Davis from Promote the Vote, our signature sponsor for Nonprofit Day at the Capitol. Promote the Vote is a dedicated, nonpartisan coalition that works tirelessly to advance voting rights and ensure that Michigan's elections are secure and accessible for all. Please join me in giving a warm round of applause to Michael Davis. Michael.
Here we go. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. There we go. I'm Michael Davis, Jr. I'm the Executive Director of Promote the Vote, and I'm thrilled to have the opportunity today to introduce our coalition and share a bit about the transformative work that we've led in recent years. I also want to set the stage for what lies ahead as we work toward achieving our 2025 pro-voter policy priorities. So, Promote the Vote. We are a coalition of over a dozen partner organizations, each of whom boasts a unique and rich history of voter advocacy, civic engagement and education, and direct service. Our coalition, which works in historically disenfranchised communities across Michigan, is united by a shared commitment to ensure that Michigan's voting system remains secure and accessible. And that's just what we've done since 2018. Before we were established as a formal organization, our PTV coalition passed Proposal 18.3, then the most expansive package of voting rights reforms ever adopted through a state ballot initiative. Passing with 67% support, Prop 18.3 eliminated the voter registration deadline, established automatic voter registration, and allowed all Michigan voters to vote absentee without providing a reason. By the end of 2020, our C3 and C4 entities were formally established, and in 2021, we pushed for fair and equitable maps through the Michigan Independent Citizen Redistricting process, while also drafting our second ballot initiative. By the end of 2022, Prop 2, or PTV 22, passed with 60% support. This created true early voting for the first time here in Michigan, made absentee voting more convenient, and allowed additional time for military and overseas ballots to return. In recent years since, we've worked tirelessly alongside the legislators, elected administrators, and other key stakeholders, many of you in the room here today, to deliver even more meaningful reforms for Michigan. Together, we've enabled pre-registration for young people, expanded access to online voter registration, and enhanced election security and integrity by advocating for bans on guns at polling places and protections for election officials. This tremendous progress reflects the unique and critical role that Promote the Vote serves here in Michigan. We identify challenges and opportunities in our election systems, and we equip administrators and advocates with the resources and tools to address those barriers. Our achievements underscore one important truth here. Michiganders overwhelmingly support making voting more accessible and our elections more secure. Accordingly, our 2025 policy goals are firmly grounded in creating that reality here in Michigan. It won't be easy, but by focusing on shared values and practical solutions, we can continue to work together to strengthen Michigan's election system and ensure that it serves every eligible voter by enhancing voter access, building on the successes of our recent reforms, safeguarding election security to ensure public trust in our systems, and fostering collaboration to address the challenges facing our democracy. With that said, it's important to acknowledge that the recently introduced House Joint Resolution B is the opposite of common sense and practical. Simply put, it's a non-solution that will prevent eligible American citizens from voting and will impose undue burdens on our election officials. So you can use that QR code, or you can go to promotethevotemi.com/HJRB for background and messaging to use as you go about your meetings with legislators today. Because the progress that we've made won't be undone. Our collective victories prove that when organizations and advocates come together, we can overcome division and deliver results for our communities, ensuring that Michigan's democracy remains a model for inclusivity, security, and accessibility for years to come. Thank you. It is now my pleasure to introduce someone who truly needs no introduction. Many of you know today's keynote speaker, Donna Murray-Brown, as she is the former president and CEO of M&A. And most recently, she served as the inaugural Vice President of Strategy and Development at the National Council of Nonprofits. She has returned home to Michigan to be here with us today. So let us all give a round of applause for Donna Murray-Brown as she makes her way to the front.
Thank you, Michael. All right. Thank you, Michael, so much for that introduction. I'm so glad it was short and sweet. Thank you so much for that. I hate to be embarrassed. I do want to say thank you to the M&A staff for inviting me. Thank you so much. It's my honor to be here. And when I look out into the room, what I really want to say, it is good to be back home. So, what I'm going to do is spend some time talking to you. And it's going to be framed in a certain way, and I'm going to share that ahead of time because I want you to be prepared because I know we've got some people who are, like me, control freaks. What is she going to talk about? Let me get this done here, right? So I am going to first remind you of who you are. I'm going to remind you of who you are. And then I'm going to encourage you. I'm going to offer some things for your consideration. And then I'm going to need to remind you again of who you are. Are you okay with that? This is call and response. Don't sit here and be quiet, okay? I want you to be lively. We are in this together, so I want you to be engaged in this. So when I was thinking about my remarks today and what is happening currently, the thing that came top of mind for me is why are we special as a nonprofit sector? The first thing is we are nonpartisan, and I'll talk about that in a few moments. And if we are unified, I would subscribe to you that we are unstoppable. So these are unprecedented times, right? Let me just say this before I even get started with my prepared remarks. Let me just say, I never used the word unprecedented as much as I have back in like 2020. Do you remember when we said COVID came and these are unprecedented times, right? I said it over and over. I never used that word so much. And now I find myself saying it again. But here's the thing. If you really have to think about American history, there were unprecedented times all the way through. This isn't new, people. This isn't new. Unprecedented times have always been part of our history. So remember that as I continue my remarks. So the first thing I'm going to do is tell you about yourself. So by and large, when you think about the nonprofit sector, we are large. That is true. Depending on the reports that you read, we reported it being 1.3 million, 1.6 million nonprofit organizations. So we're pretty large. But when you think about what it's made up of, and even thinking about your own organizations, we're small. Mighty but small. And so you think about, we've got 92% of nonprofit organizations have budgets that are less than $1 million. Does that speak to anybody in this room? Okay? So we are small, but we are mighty, but we are small. That's who we are. But even with that and the numbers that we have, we are employing people, and so we are 11% of the workforce. So we are large. I mean, this is larger than manufacturing when you think about it. This is large. It's huge. We take up a lot of space and we offer so much. And we don't, oftentimes I don't think we think about that. But what I really want to hone in on, particularly today as we're here at the Capitol, is that only 3% of this large group of nonprofits that we call the nonprofit sector actually engage in lobbying. Here we are at the Capitol. Hope you have your appointments after this. But 100% of nonprofits can lobby. Who knew that? 3% do it, 100% can do it. So I want to remind you, even with that backdrop, that you are brilliant. How do I know this? Some people know my history, that I worked in banking. That was where I actually worked most of my career for like 22, 24 years. It escapes me. As I get older, I can't remember it all. I'm going to be honest with you. But I do know that I've been in the nonprofit sector less time. It's been about 16 years or so that I've been in the nonprofit sector. And so I've worked in the private sector, and I've seen the brightest people, I thought, until I came into the nonprofit sector. You are creative. You are brilliant. You get things done. When people say there's no way, you find a way, some kind of way. We do that, right? And we have superpowers. But I'm going to tell you about the superpowers. You might be really interested in what do you mean by superpowers. We have superpowers. But I don't want us to be hung up on that because I don't want us to feel as if we have to do it all by ourselves, because we don't. But I do want to remind you that you are brilliant, you get things done, and you have superpowers. Are you with me? All right, great. Now, on the flip side of that, what I happen to know, I knew I was going to get you to laugh here. This is true, though. This is what's happening right now. But guess what? It is not just happening right now. Who knew that? How many of you were working in your respective organizations in 2020 during the pandemic? Show of hands. Okay. So I want you to know, and just bear with me because I don't want to take us there. That was a scary time, but I also want us to acknowledge that time. Because during that time, things were shut down. We were in isolation from one another. And do you know that that is also a diffuser of power, right? So we were isolated. We had to figure out how we were going to serve our communities, but we figured it out. Whether it was arts and culture who leveraged technology and said we can bring art to the community by leveraging technology, or whether it was an organization serving individuals, you figured that out, right? In 6 feet of distance from one another, you figured it out. But the reality of it is we also had a lot of loss, and we don't talk about that. Oftentimes when you hear people speaking at a podium about the pandemic and lessons learned, they talk about the tactics, right? The mechanical things, leveraging technologies, going remote, and all those things, which are great things that came out of that, great outcomes. But the other piece of it is that we had a lot of loss. And many of us still have that loss inside of us right now. We have not had an opportunity to really let that go. We moved on. And now we find ourselves here in this current moment. The challenge is that we have not really overcome the moment from the pandemic. And let me tell you why. So we know at the National Council of Nonprofits, we did a study when I was there in 2021, they did a study, and also in 2023, just to understand what happened since the pandemic to now in terms of nonprofits and how they operated. What we found is that more than 75%, nearly, particularly in Michigan, it was over 75%, had job vacancies. Are many of you still experiencing job vacancies? We're told yes. The answer is yes. Many of you are still experiencing job vacancies. Well, what does that mean? It's not just about there's job vacancies. You need people to be in those roles. Those roles that are not filled, the majority of those roles are the direct service roles, the roles that are actually interacting with people and delivering services. So if you don't have those individuals in those roles, then you also have the high demand for services and not the ability to meet that. That is a confluence of issues that create stress and they create burnout. And you also have this whole notion of not healing, if you will, from the pandemic that you're carrying with you in this moment today. I just want to have that sit with you for a few moments, only because I don't think we actually looked at how those things are happening within our organizations and where we are today. So we're stressed out and clinically burned out. I know we use that word burnout, but it is a clinical condition, and we are burned out. And left unaddressed, it makes it really challenging to be able to support our communities. And right now there is too much noise. We are being distracted from the work that we're doing. Over 200 executive orders will have your head spinning trying to figure out how to make sense of it all. But we're still required to do our work with this noise, with this backdrop. So how do we reconcile this? I would subscribe to you that we do have all that we need to meet this moment. And you're not going to hear me say, what should foundations do? You're not going to hear me say, what should the government do? Because in that context, we're thinking about money, and we think in that context that money solves our problems. But let me tell you something. Money is a tool, right, to help you to solve issues and challenges. It is something that is a necessary tool, but the power doesn't lie there. The power yesterday and today and forever lies with the people. And guess what? You are the people. Are you the people? So what I'm going to ask you today is to go with me and just to recognize it's back to the basics. It's not so complex. This distraction that we're experiencing is by design. It's really not that difficult. It really isn't that difficult. So what I'm offering to you today to consider is that in the work that you do, to understand that you are the experts. Do you believe that you're the experts? Okay. You are the experts. And do you also believe that with you being the experts, you don't know everything? I know that's hard. That was hard for somebody. Somebody was like, oh, I thought I did know everything. I am asking if you could acknowledge both things can be true. You can be the expert, and you also cannot know everything. And that if you were to build your knowledge, right, to build your knowledge on the work that you do, even the work that you do, and know that some of the mitigating opportunities, if you will, would be to understand from a data perspective, how you are making impact. And when I say data, I know all of you have data. You're collecting data on the work that you do. That is fantastic. Continue to do that. That's one thing. That's data static in time. I'm asking you to look at also predictive analysis. If your work was not there, or if because your work is there, you predict that you're going to mitigate this with using data, right? I also want to subscribe to you to say, if your work was not there, what does that look like? How many of you have that already available? It's okay if you don't. Oh, look at you. Show off. We got to show off. We have one show off. No, just teasing. But that's great. I want us to build our knowledge about our own work. And then I also want to recognize that unlike the pandemic, when it first started, we do not have to work in isolation. I would also subscribe to you that we have to, I'm begging you to work in community. Right now, we are in community. The people in this room right now are the right people in the right moment. This is on purpose. Seize this opportunity. Be present with this opportunity. This here, us today, is on purpose. So this moment is bringing a lot of challenges. I don't want to sugarcoat this. I am totally against toxic positivity. So I'm not going to tell you everything is good. But I am going to tell you that although things are challenging right now, there are opportunities, and I want you to lean in the opportunity zone. Can you do that? Can you do that? And let me tell you, it's hard to do that on your own. That's why I keep saying here on this podium that we have to be in community because we need each other. We absolutely need each other. I didn't say we have to like each other, but we actually need each other. So what do I mean by building community? There are several things that we can consider around building community, because just because we're in this space, building community is active. It's an action. You can't just say I'm in community because I'm sitting here at this table amongst friends, old and new. I want you to be curious about each other's work because there's interconnectedness that we need to recognize that only can occur when you're actively engaged in community. So think about the person that you're sitting next to. If you don't know them, I'm hoping that's the case. I know Pontiac Community Foundation is all sitting together. I'm giving a shout out. I really love seeing that. But I'm asking you to move about and meet other people and find out, be curious about their work, and deliberately, intentionally find the connections between what they're offering and what you're offering, because it is there if you look for it, right? And establish authentic proximity. And so, just don't be in everybody's sauce just because, right? This is really about making sure that it makes sense and it's intentional, and be authentic about that. There's nothing worse than recognizing when someone's not being authentic, and that does not work. And so I'm asking you to think carefully about how you connect in that way. And I want you to continue to dream big. We dreamt big when we were in the pandemic. We always have, the nonprofit sector, the way that it was created is because we are big dreamers. We see what other people can't see. We understand that there is a solution. We do see the challenges like most people. We see the challenges, but the difference, what sets us apart, is that we see the opportunities and we see a vision of something better. That's what sets us apart. Continue to dream big. We are needed because others are so mired, including us, but if we have each other, we can get out of it quickly. Others are mired in what can't be, but we are designed. By design, we are visionaries of what can be, and we can see that clearly. I'm not going to talk about every aspect here, but the one piece that I really want to talk about here is speaking in one voice. There's power in doing that. We have to create and control the narrative about the nonprofit sector. Otherwise, it's going to be created for us. And in fact, in some ways, it's already being created for us. In fact, in some ways, we are being called NGOs to dehumanize the work, to keep it kind of sterile. Nonprofit or non-governmental organizations, AKA nonprofits. So we need to be able to talk about who we are, about what we do, so people understand that. Please consider creating and managing our own narrative collectively. We need to have a collective vision. I think we have that, but we have to be able to connect and say who we are and speak truth to power as a collective voice. Can we do that? Will we do that? So I was really bummed out because Detroit Lions was not in the Super Bowl. But I was okay. I got over that. And I was okay, and if they're Kansas City fans, I apologize. But I was kind of okay that I was rooting for the underdog, right? So one of the things that Jalen Hurts said, and he really got it from, I think, Bear Bryant, the legendary coach at Alabama State University. He said that offense wins games and defense wins championships. And when he said that, I immediately thought about all of us and the work that we do. And I thought about offense being the everyday advocacy that we do. Like, you can't stop doing everyday advocacy. Do we know what everyday advocacy is? Talking about the work that we do to legislators, talking about the work that we do to those that are leading state departments, talking about our work and advocating about our work, right? We can't stop doing that. That's offense. We should be doing that. That's scoring. We should be scoring all the time. But now we're in a situation that requires defense, defending who we are, defending the nonprofit sector, defending our work. And we have to be just as vigorous around that as well. But with everyday advocacy, I want you to just remember the lessons from the pandemic, right? That we were able to actually get things done, and we did create narratives about what we were doing. I mean, we started using terms like frontline workers more than we ever have. People started to understand a bit more about what the nonprofit sector is. Continue those lessons from the pandemic as we think about how do we look at being in everyday advocates every single day. We should be talking about that. Now, I'll say this. You might have to start with your own family. Does any of your family really know what you're doing? I mean, like, honestly, I'm just going to digress for a minute. When I was in banking, my parents were so proud. Thanksgiving dinner. She's our banker daughter. And then when I came to the nonprofit sector, they could not explain. I don't even know she gets paid. I think she volunteers. So sometimes your everyday advocacy, practice on your family, because they don't know what you're doing probably too. So practice on your family, and when they can start being able to talk about your work. And I'm being funny just a little bit, because our friends and our family also are opportunities for us to talk about our work, because we are all community. Does that make sense? And this line, a lot of people don't like to hear this, but we are. And I hate to say it, but I do need to say it in this moment. We are needed now more than ever. And that means it's going to require us to lean into some things, I'll say that. And another word I don't necessarily like is efficient. I think you don't like that word either, do you, David? Efficient. Effective is, I mean, it's borderline efficient, but effective, I'm going to say, is a little bit better. But in order for us to really be able to meet this moment and the opportunities in this moment, it does require an action from us. Precision. It requires unification. And I can't say that more, I can't say that anymore. Like, there are lanes for all of us. There are some who are going to be bolder and can say things and speak truth to power, and that is their role. Activism, right? Movement building, all of that, that is their role. There are some that are about the academic or the technical aspect of the work. There are some that are in that lane. There are some that need to really engage the community, and they're really best suited to do that. I guess what I'm saying is that we all have different roles. As diverse as the nonprofit sector is in terms of all that we do, it sometimes feels like it's harder because of the diversity to unify, because we have these different areas. But the reality of it is that we are designed to make our communities better. Can we unify on that? So if we can, yeah, you can clap, yeah. So if we can unify on that principle, I think, coupled with our unstoppable spirit and the service that we provide and nonpartisanship, I haven't talked about that yet, but I will, then I think that we can actually affect the change that we want to be, and we can be effective in this moment. Because effectiveness right now, we have to be swift with this. We can't keep talking about it. Can't keep researching about it. It's here. The time is now. So I told you about your superpower, and I'm going to tell you what it means. So it's about nonpartisanship. That is our superpower. Why do I say that? Because by design and by law, quite frankly, we address policies, but we do not address politics. So when you're thinking about this environment that we are in right now, we are the ones that can be trusted, because what we really are considering is one thing only, and that is our communities. So our superpower is that we are resilient and we are durable. Those are two words I can't stand, because what they say is that we've had trauma, we had challenges, and oftentimes we talk about ourselves in that we are sustainable, that's great. We are resilient, we're durable, you know. You can hold on to that if you want. It is absolutely true. Those things are true. But I would like to subscribe to you that there's a better narrative, that we are agents of hope. We are beacons of light. And because we are nonpartisan, we can be those things, and we can be trusted in that. I want us to really remember that we are mission-based organizations, right, in our nonpartisanship, which is so helpful about that. We can stay focused on that. And we are designed to meet our mission, and we know that we've done that is when our vision has come to fruition, right? And so what that looks like is our approach to work, which I think is another thing that sets us apart, and it is a superpower, is that we are human-centered. And those of you that are working in other areas might say, what about the earth? What about this? We're all human-centered. When we think about the work that we do, we have all believed that those that we serve have the wisdom. Those that we serve have the wisdom. Even Mother Earth tells us what it needs, right? We are designed to listen to the wisdom that comes from those that we serve, and that's what sets us apart, is our approach. We're data-driven, but I gave you some suggestions about how we can make that data a bit stronger, so consider that. We're also impact-driven. That sets us apart, too, because we're really aiming for the dreams, the outcomes that we've all seen in our heads that sometimes others don't see, and we aim for that. And then there's a range of things that we do because we're so different that when coupled and brought together, that we can be able to make a difference as a collective unit, but it is going to take some work. So one of my favorite authors, I'm going to read this to you because I think it's important in this moment. What we must do is commit ourselves to some future that include each other and to work toward that future with the particular strengths of our individual identities. And in order for us to do this, we must allow each other our differences and at the same time as we recognize our sameness. So I'm going to leave you with this, with your superpowers and all that you are, because you are brilliant. And as I said, I'm going to remind you again of who you are and what you can do. And that's with this last quote here. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world, because guess what? Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Thank you.
All right, it's on. Another round of applause for Donna. Thank you, Donna. I myself needed that inspiration as well. So we thought it would be great to follow up that keynote with some insight from previous president and CEOs for the Michigan Nonprofit Association. And I actually think I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning of things. I'm Kelley Kuhn, president and CEO, current president and CEO of the Michigan Nonprofit Association. I'm joined, of course, by Donna Murray-Brown, who you just listened to and heard from. Kyle Caldwell currently serves as the president and CEO for the Council of Michigan Foundations, and he too is a former president and CEO of M&A. And Dave Egner here, he serves as president and CEO for the Ralph C. Wilson Jr. Foundation, and he too serves as a previous president and CEO. So I guess that's like the common bond that we have up here on the stage together, is we all wear the title of president and CEO of M&A. Donna, in your remarks, you talked about the importance of the role we all play, right, in this ecosystem of the nonprofit sector. And while M&A doesn't do direct service delivery, we support all of you who do, that are in community. And I think it's really important when we think about 35 years of existence for the association. What does it mean in our role in the ecosystem? How do we play into action? How do we play into everyday advocacy efforts? We have a role. And I thought it would be really great for us to just take a little bit of time to hear from the previous presidents and CEOs. Think about the time when you served. What was unique about that time since 1990? I mean, I'll tell you what I was doing in 1990, which was I was in middle school, not quite thinking about my aspiring career to be in the nonprofit sector. So I just thought I would point that out for my fellow panel members. That's what I was doing in 1990. But Dave, you were here in 1990 serving as president and CEO. Take us back. Tell us a little bit about...
That's a low blow. I have the mic.
Hey,
I have to defend him on that.
As a senior in college, I didn't get to put that. No, I'm just kidding. Take us back to the beginning days of the association, right? Russ had a vision. Tell us a little bit about, give us some insight to what was it in that moment in time, what was important about advocacy, how was foundations laid for the work? Give us some insight.
First, we make fire. So as a young executive assistant to Russ Mobby, I started sitting at tables to organize the Michigan Nonprofit Forum, which was launched in 1990. Russ's notion of what if was, could we call together all of the major players of the sector to discuss common issues, research how to attack those issues. The issue of policy wasn't in front of the organization at all. As a matter of fact, when it was the Michigan Nonprofit Forum, there were so many associations that were doing policy work that were a bit concerned that M&A would deviate their agenda, that in order to move on a policy issue, you required a 100% unanimous vote of the forum's board. So policy was not something that was being focused on. Fast forward to '93, as the forum became the Michigan Nonprofit Association, the focus was on membership. There was this thing happening at the federal level called devolution. For those of you who are in middle school, That was the federalist system starting to push down to the state level. So we'll use the states as the pass-through for our resources. And there was a need to step out and start working on more advocacy-like issues. So the early plays in that were, one, to work with the Attorney General's office to set up some structure, a person responsible for nonprofits, because there was a question occasionally about what was the role, could they do the work, could they do policy, et cetera, and it was being challenged by the Attorney General's office. And so we found an expert there. We built a resource that was used. It was an education manual for legislators and cabinet members that was built in '96 that was distributed to anyone running for office. We work with public sector consultants to do that. And then the third thing we did is, thanks to the Kellogg Foundation, we launched a thing we called at the time the Public Policy Institute, and it was roughly $1 million grant to start moving in the policy direction. And that's when I stepped out and Sam Singh came in and really drove the first policy work that was happening. So all I did was set up Sam Singh.
Speaking of Sam, he's not here currently because he's in session, but we do know that Sam is planning to join us for lunch. So if you know Sam and want an opportunity to speak with Sam, he will be with us later. But don't worry, we're going to fill in the Sam era. And same question to you, Kyle. Maybe give us a sense of Sam's time and then how that supported the things that were important at the time that you were leading, because Sam would have served between Dave and Kyle.
Yeah, I'll go back a little bit further when obviously you were in the cradle.
Thanks, Kyle.
You're welcome. In the early '90s, there was also a movement that Dave and I and Sam were all part of to promote the human capital side of the nonprofit sector. So Governor Romney had started this notion that the idea that you needed to facilitate volunteerism and that human capital was vital to community, but it was also vital to the nonprofit sector. When you think about it, the biggest decisions that are made in a nonprofit are human-driven, as Donna pointed out, starting with the board. People who day-to-day do not do what a nonprofit does, but they oversee the assets, they hire the CEO, they engage in the community building, the fundraising. So that human capital and the volunteerism that we know is the driver for much of community engagement and change was vital. And so this notion that there should be a national movement, including a president's summit, to bring all leaders together to make a call to action, that and a number of other initiatives came together to create national service, to create the President's Summit on what became the President's Summit on Volunteerism and America's Promise, all driven around this idea of human capital. Sam was a Points of Light ambassador in the governor's office under the Engler administration, and I was a lonely intern at the Michigan Community Service Commission when they announced AmeriCorps. And it was Sam's job and my job as two lowly interns to stand up that program in Michigan. Our boss got hired away to run it in DC. So we were literally flying the plane as we were building it. I mentioned that human capital thread line because when Sam came in to the Michigan Nonprofit Association, he was the head of the Volunteer Centers of Michigan. And so his whole framework coming into this was, how do you mobilize people? How do you give them the tools, the capacity, the resources they need? He launched a leadership program. He launched the public policy agenda for M&A that got local leaders the tools they needed to understand how to advocate. He launched a how-to manual on how to do advocacy and lobbying, which are, as you all know, are different degrees of engagement. And he started to really get the board involved in thinking strategically across all their associations. And it was a 40-member board at that time, so it was not small, but it was representative of the sector. You had arts organizations, faith organizations, higher education, K-12, a whole wide diaspora of associations and constituents involved in the board. So it was important for them to do what Donna pointed out, talk about the impact of the sector, the role it plays in community, and have policymakers understand that. When I came on in 2007, and I had the exquisite timing of coming into the Great Recession. That was my job, to help the sector figure that out. I hired Donna to help me figure out how do we think strategically as our Detroit office director, and how do we help the field organize itself and think about how do we lean into the crisis that we were facing. And we had the opportunity to build a first capacity building program of its type to help nonprofits on a regional basis think about strategically, how do you think about alliances? How do you think about consolidations? How do you think about capacity building? And that's the program that Kelley headed up when she joined M&A at that time. So I think that kind of brings us to the current state and how I kind of came into the work. The key things that I was concerned about was how do you build all the tables for people to engage in the decision makers that affect the sector. So Dave talked about some of the strategies that they talked about with the Attorney General's office. We actually created a table to meet with our regulator, the Attorney General's office, on a quarterly basis, talk about issues, understand what they are looking at, and try to make sure we got ahead of big problems before they launched. We also started a nonprofit caucus. So the legislature thinking about how they advocate on part of the sector. Dave and a former colleague, Dave Campbell, on the back of a cocktail napkin, wrote up a plan to think about how do we engage with the executive branch, who was coming at us full throttle during the Great Recession about how philanthropy can help address some of the needs, and needed to sort of prioritize, and created the Office of Foundation Liaison. We also set up other engagement tables with the nonprofit sector to do voter registration, community engagement. So all of these tables were part of the era that I think I was privileged to be part of.
Thanks, Kyle. And of course, that leads us in because we hired Donna under your leadership, and then Donna ascends into the president and CEO job and role when you leave. Tell us, Donna, give us some insight. You've inspired us today, but give us some insight to what was it like in the time that you were leading the association? Again, what was top of mind? How did we build off of this history that we had? Because along the way, you all celebrated important anniversaries as well.
Yeah. So for me, you heard about all of this wonderful groundbreaking, and I say groundbreaking infrastructure that Kyle and Dave talked to us, that just spoke about. And I say that because having had the opportunity to work at Michigan Nonprofit Association and then go to the National Council of Nonprofits, I was able to see what was happening in other states too, and even as president and CEO of Michigan Nonprofit Association, was able to see what was happening in other states, and no one was like Michigan. So let me say that. Thank you. Thank you to this leadership here for creating infrastructures that others only try to emulate at best, was built here. So for me, I had this strong foundation and infrastructure. One of the things that was top of mind for me, I think, was this notion of civic engagement and how to get people here, like you, involved in placing you inside the infrastructure that we have so it can be amplified and get more and more and more under the tent, if you will. Recognizing that advocacy is utterly important. It also, and lobbying is utterly important, but it also is a bit scary. And I mentioned that, and what was top of mind, quite frankly, when I was at the Michigan Nonprofit Association, is one of my first visits to, I know I didn't say I was gonna say this, but my first visit to a legislator, and I did not have my ducks in a row. I went there, they had, I didn't remember to look up the districts being aligned differently. And when I went in there, it was supposed to be an easy meeting. That's what I was told. This is going to be an easy meeting. And I went in there, and he was nice, but then he also called me on some information, and I responded, and it was incorrect. And I was mortified. And what I remember in that moment is how many other nonprofit organizations, our members and beyond nonprofits, were maybe not confident to be able to be in those rooms. and to advocate in a way that they feel comfortable with. And so working with Kelley and kind of all overlapped, working together was really this notion of how can we build the capacity of nonprofits so they can build their confidence. And one of those opportunities was the census, believe it or not. And while the census, at least at that time, was not politicized, it quickly became politicized. It was one of those benign activities that we thought, if we can get everyday nonprofit organizations engaged, leveraging the infrastructure that we have, and give them the tools to be able to support their communities and get them engaged in being part of the census as a precursor to what they could do further, it seemed like it was a really good idea to do. And I think from doing that, we were able to engage a lot of nonprofits, but also we were able to build upon a public-private partnership that existed in terms of getting a complete count in the state of Michigan and being able to go into setting up nonprofit organizations to be way more active than before in the redistricting process. I'm really proud of that, that nonprofits stepped up and got their communities engaged in a process that actually directly impacted them. And it was all because of the infrastructure that was already built up within the organization, and having that same infrastructure be connected to all the work that all of you do and the communities that you serve. So that was top of mind for me. And right now, I think when you think about the trajectory of how M&A started and where we are today, we are built to be unstoppable right now, thanks to the leadership of everyone that came before me, and with Kelley's leadership, it's completely soaring. And so I just say that for me, top of mind was leveraging the infrastructure, including individuals, nonprofit leaders like yourselves, and the communities that you serve, and translating that into what it means for us to be a partner with the government here in the state of Michigan. And we were wildly successful, and I think we continue to be successful in that vein.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just add, as the current president and CEO, by the way, I served under Kyle and Donna, as Kyle indicated. I have been here 17 years of M&A's history. I love this organization. Thank you. I love the work of nonprofits. Kyle did hire me right out of college, just for the record. So I say that because, again, in this role as president and CEO, which I think is the best job in the entire world, so sorry, you all probably think you have the best job, but really I have the best job currently. We still see this infrastructure and how Michigan is positioned unlike any other state across the country. These relationships, the foundations that things have been built on. What it did, as Donna has even indicated in her remarks, is it just prepared us. So Census 2020 comes into play. It's $10 million campaign that we did across the entire state of Michigan. $6 million is appropriated from state government. Another $4 million is raised over 40 foundations across the state. Everybody said this is important work that we're doing, right? Civic and community engagement is at the core, our human capital. We've talked all about that. But none of us thought we would then have to mobilize that same infrastructure and those same relationships to advocate for 2 years to get the nonprofit relief program. But the nonprofit relief program came right on the heels of the census work to be sure that we had the $50 million carve out to support the great work of nonprofits. This is the infrastructure. This is how things, yeah, 50 million. This is how things move so quickly. This is how we go to say nonprofits are critical. And I do think what we're seeing is our interconnectedness into community, our interconnectedness into a lot of things. And I just stress that point because that's the moment that we're living in now. So we have a couple minutes left. Thanks, Joan. To have you all, while you've given us a journey of 35 years of M&A's history, a commitment to public policy and advocacy, because we're here for Nonprofit Day at the Capitol, you were asked to think about 3 to 5, but I'm going to challenge you to give me your number one principle. What do you think in your tenure as a leader for M&A applied then in the work that we're doing and applies now as a takeaway for everybody that's here today? What's the one principle thing that you think still speaks and is representative here today?
Since you insulted me with age, I'm giving 2 anyway. One, we need a collective data story. If you went back to or just post-election, pre-inauguration.
Yeah.
The language that was used out of one perhaps non-elected official that's looking at efficiency was that the nonprofit sector in many cases was a group of illegals doing government activity that weren't paying taxes. I think that's close to a quote. Doggone it, we do pay taxes. Let's get the data in place. I would love to be able to say in this county in Michigan, in your district legislator, in your district congressperson, the nonprofit sector pays X amount in payroll taxes. We provide Y amount in services. We also accumulate human capital that's volunteer that would result in X amount of dollars into the system. We've got to have that collective story to put to bed the misinformation that this is a group of do-gooders that just suck money out of the economy. And that's terribly important. It's only a half a one, it's not a full one. The other thing I would say to you is, in a world where data matters less because alternative data can be introduced, you have to have stories with your data. So you need the data, push it out there, but talk about the man down the street that you know, right, that will go hungry if Meals on Wheels doesn't work. Talk about that child that will end up being unable to be a participant in the workforce because literacy wasn't taught the right way. You've got to have stories that match the data in order to make this powerful story about who the sector is.
Thanks, Dave.
So does that mean I get 3 because you cheated with? No,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, you get one.
I get 1. Thanks. I would. Mine is very simple. Just remember your partnerships. What's unique about Michigan, when you leave Michigan and you come back, Donna will attest to this, the spirit of collaboration in this state is remarkable. That is not just among charitable, quote unquote, organizations. You have to be a partner with your foundations and your philanthropic partners. Remember, first off, that foundations cannot make up for what government funding supports. If you gave every grant from private sector in Michigan to the state of Michigan to expend, and you started from the calendar year, you'd be done by January 30th. If you gave the corpus of every invested endowment in Michigan, even some of the national ones, and gave it over to state government, you're done by April. That's a real factoid. Then that's really important for everyone to understand, not only for us, that philanthropy plays a very specific partnership role, because we can only do investments in resources in the nonprofit sector to make community change. We can provide other resources, thought leadership, but in the final analysis, it's really nonprofits and the people that you serve that really make the quality of life in Michigan happen. So talk to your funders, be sure they understand the issues, talk to your trustees, make sure they understand your issues so that they can all advocate on your behalf.
Totally agree. I'm going to be really quick because I had a lot of your time earlier. The wisdom is in the community, period. And it's really important for the stories that Dave talked about, and even I talked about in Kyle as well, is that this feedback loop in terms of what you're doing, what you're seeing, and what you're hearing is necessary for Michigan Nonprofit Association to be able to support the work that you do. So we're all in this together.
Here a little later, we appreciate the opportunity to give you some insight into what 35 years of history looks like for M&A and public policy. So thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Rachel Richards. I'm with the Michigan League for Public Policy. Sorry, a couple of my colleagues are right over there. And I am very pleased to be here to moderate this next panel on the state budget and the equitable division of state resources. And so I'm going to introduce up first Kyle Garant, who's our Deputy State Budget Director. We'll also be joined by House Appropriations Chairperson Ann Bolin, as well as Senate Appropriations Chairperson Sarah Anthony, and they will be coming up shortly. But I will turn it over to Kyle to start.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. We have some slides that we'll put up. Thank you for having me, and we're happy to be here on your National Nonprofit Day. Hope you guys have great conversations amongst each other and with lawmakers here in the building. So my pleasure to provide a kind of a quick, brief overview of the governor's executive recommendation. Have the opportunity to share some details on the budget process and what you can expect over the next couple months. So we'll just dive right in. I've only got a few slides, and we have the chairs are here as well. I'm going to get some conversation, but $83.5 billion in a couple of slides is hard. So I've tried to target it towards what I think you will be most interested in hearing about. But as you can tell, the total budget is $83.5 billion. 41.7 or almost 42% of that is from federal resources. I know that's a topic of mind for folks these days as news out of Washington continues to be uncertain. Only a total of 18.3% comes from what's known as the general fund, meaning the majority of our fund sources are dedicated, have dedicated purposes for use. This is a different kind of breakdown in terms of the types of things. The total budget, the total general fund funds, 80%, and this is typical of the last 3 or 4 budget years cycles. 80% of that GF goes to fund things like healthcare, protecting vulnerable children and adults, public safety, and higher education. On the next slide, you'll see adjusted for inflation, the growth of the general fund since the governor took office, since the governor's first budget in fiscal year 19. You can see that the general fund has remained relatively flat since then, with significant investments in the areas of mental and behavioral health services, over $420 million to expand access for Michigan residents, $325 million worth of investment in our child welfare and foster care systems, and over $1 billion in investment in healthcare coverage to low-income, elderly, and disabled Michiganders. To kind of further highlight the federal fund piece, you can see, again, the breakdown of how much we get on an annual basis for the fiscal year 26 rec. There's about $34.8 billion worth of federal money that's coming into our state. That's then, for the most part, awarded, granted, or given out through some sort of distribution formula. Compared to last year, it's very similar. I think last year's was like $33.8 billion. So $1 billion is a lot, but it's very similar as we've seen during the COVID years, increased federal investment in states, and Michigan has benefited from that. For comparison, our BSF, our Budget Stabilization Fund, our rainy day fund, is a total of $2.8 billion, which is the highest it's ever been. But when you compare that to what we get on an annual basis from the feds, the notion or the idea of Michigan being able to backstop any loss in revenue from the federal level is really not an option when you look at the disproportionality of dollars. As a state, we're better positioned than a lot of other states who are already on the precipice of making billions of dollars worth of cuts. When I talk to my counterparts in other states, they were already doing that, and then the notion of having loss in federal revenue just compounds that. Just a quick highlight here that the proposed budget proposes $50 million investments both in the main BSF fund as well as the school rainy day fund that we created 2 years ago. Again, so it brings it just shy of $3 billion worth of funds in both of those 2 rainy day funds. On the next slide, just highlight some of the key investment areas, some of the themes you'll see throughout the budget. This budget lowers costs for Michiganders, continues to support our students, protects and defends Michiganders, focuses on making government work better, and stimulating our economy to grow jobs. 2 areas I'd like to highlight. First, on lowering costs. Many Michiganders, continue to feel the impacts of inflation, and even though that's easing and prices are coming down, Michiganders are still feeling the pinch when they go to the grocery store, when they go to the gas station, when they go out for a meal. So this budget focuses on trying to reduce the burden on Michiganders with key investments in affordable housing, additional $50 million for affordable housing, an increase of $1 million to ensure test fee caps for AP tests are in place for our low-income students. Additional $5 million investment for the expansion of MyAble to ensure disabled Michiganders can continue to save money through that program. It expands our water affordability program by $7 million and also includes $96.4 million to access Medicaid by changing income standards and thresholds to access benefits for our elderly Michiganders. On the next slide, just some key investments in the skilled talent. We know many of you provide services in this area in your communities, but also take advantage of wanting skilled talent in your organization. So this budget invests in the workforce to provide Michiganders skills and opportunities to create competitive and helping organizations like yours, again, access those talented people. The budget includes $54.8 million for the Going Pro program, which provides job training grants to private sector businesses and nonprofits, which will result in an estimated 35,000 new hires and employees when fully implemented. The budget also includes access to higher education with a $50 million investment in the post-secondary scholarship fund, which through the Michigan Achievement Scholarship provides a tuition-free pathway for full-time community college students and 2 out of 3 full-time students in our public and private four-year institutions. This past fall, more than 56,000 scholarships were awarded during the fall semester, and this investment grows the fund, and when fully implemented, we expect 100,000 Michiganders to be able to have more affordable access to post-secondary opportunities. Can transition to the next slide. This is what I call the budget cycle of life. If you can look in the upper, kind of to the right-hand side there, in the February, we just presented the executive recommendation to the chairs in this very room last week. And so over the next few months, it's theirs to play with and to work through committees and develop their relative recommendations from their chambers. In May, there'll be another consensus revenue conference that will essentially identify how many resources or what the number of resources are available to craft the final budget with negotiations taking place typically in June and with the July 1 start date, and the governor's been able to do that in her time here, balance budgets on time in July, so that's our goal. And then lastly, just want to say thank you. I know I used to, when I had less gray in my hair, I know there's some old jokes going on earlier, so when I had less gray in my hair, I did internships and volunteered in nonprofits here in the community in the Lansing area, and I know how invaluable those partnerships and resources and services are, not only to state agencies, but to local governments as well. So we really appreciate the continued work you do, and happy to be here today and happy to take questions later with the chairs, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. So now we're going to hear from our appropriations chairs, and I'll start with Chair Anthony. Could you please take a few minutes and share perhaps your goals and priorities for this next budget cycle?
Thank you, and good morning, and thank you for inviting me to this occasion. I don't have a long commute. I'm born and raised right here in Lansing, and yet I still am late to a lot of meetings, but I made it on time today, so I'm very excited about that. And I am excited to continue to serve as the appropriations chair in the Senate. It is the honor of a lifetime to be able to have a literal seat at the table and to bring what I believe are working people to the negotiations table. I have always thought that, and it becomes more and more apparent every year that we negotiate, that budgets are moral documents. That it's one thing to say that you care about children, that you care about people having housing, that you care about the right to health care and food, but show me the money. My mom is from the show me state, and I tell you that when you talk about what you value, that is where it shows up. It's in our state's budget, so it's truly an honor. I am a broken record. The values that we've prioritized now for the past 2 budgets is what we will continue to fight for. One is to make sure that we're lowering costs for people. Kyle mentioned that while some wages are going up it doesn't feel like it for so many people because of inflation and the rising cost of everything. So looking for opportunities across the board to make sure that we're lowering costs for Michigan's families is the top priority. Getting a little more granular in that, making sure that we are prioritizing housing. It's something that, whether you're a senior citizen or a young person trying to figure out if you're going to stay in Michigan or take your fancy degree somewhere else, making sure that you have an affordable place to lay your head is something that we are truly missing the mark. We've had record investments in housing, so we want to continue to invest and make sure that the nexus of both quality and affordable housing options is something that we're prioritizing. And because I vowed to bring my entire self to this big job, I use every part of myself, including making sure that I am looking at things through an equity lens. You know, the reality is that for years and years, so many powerful and wealthy and well-connected people have had their voices at the negotiations table. And oftentimes that has not included single moms or people from marginalized communities, people who can't afford a lobbyist. They have not adequately been represented at the negotiations table. And so I strongly believe that if we want to reflect a budget that is serving people, that we have to make sure that we are opening government up and looking out for people who normally don't have a voice. And then the last thing I will say is, despite some of the, I think the chaos is the word that most of us are using at the federal level, I want to make sure that we are protecting Michigan's people. And I have to ensure, thank you, and whether it is maintaining critical services like Meals on Wheels or childcare, Head Start. I got this terrible call from my sister-in-law a week or so ago that she received a notice that she was being laid off at Head Start here in Lansing. Because of just some of the executive orders and the swings. And at the same time, my niece was told she didn't have childcare. These are things that, as appropriators, we will have to separate fact from fiction, not get our news from Twitter, not get, or X, or whatever we call it now, but actually maintain a level of sanity and ensuring that at the end of the day, regardless of the rhetoric, that we're maintaining services for people, for vulnerable populations. And in the event that things go left, we will need the nonprofit sector to do what you've always done, which is stand in the gap in ways that sometimes government isn't best equipped to actually fill the needs of our communities. You all have done this for a generation, is stand in when state and federal resources are vulnerable. And so that would be my request, because you know I have good home training, so you don't go to a place without saying what you need. We will need your partnership, and I think now more than ever that's going to be seen and felt in our respective communities. So thank you.
Good morning. I'm Representative Ann Bolin, and I chair the House Appropriations Committee. And welcome to the Capitol, and really thank you very much for your very, very important work in our communities. I really, it is the honor of a lifetime to serve in the legislature, and it is quite a privilege to be serving as the Appropriations Chair in the House. And Senator Anthony and I came in together. She's moved on to the Senate, but I look very much forward to our partnership and making sure we put forth that budget, good, fair budget with the help of the Budget Office as well. Honestly, my priorities are very, very simple, and that is making sure that the government's role is to protect the public's health, safety, and welfare, to get out of the way, and make sure that we are providing taxpayers value for their dollars. I don't think that it's government's responsibility to find all the solutions and answers. I do know that our nonprofits play a vital role. You know, you have boots on the ground and can do it way better than we can mandates from this Capitol or Washington, D.C. On the budget, we do have an obligation to present and adopt a balanced budget constitutionally by September 30th. We have a statute in place that calls for that by July 1st. We will work to make sure that all of our critical services are funded. We don't want to leave people behind, but that's a lot of zeros. We have seen our state budget grow by over 35% in just 6 short years. Frankly, it's not sustainable. So we have to really look for, squeeze every penny out of every dollar. And we're going to do that. Work very hard, again, in partnership. Senator Anthony said this, it is extremely important. You know the problems, you know the solutions. And so this is a partnership. And, I invite you to the table and look forward to working with you over the next couple of months.
Well, thank you. So this will be a question for each of you. Kyle mentioned in his presentation that our state budget is 42% federal funding, and many nonprofits are facing potential federal funding cuts or funding freezes for work that our communities need us to do. What are you committed to do to ensure that we can weather shifts at the federal level and continue to provide critical services? And Kyle, I'll start with you.
Thank you. As I shared, we have been very focused on this issue since it was sprung on us a couple weeks ago, and I think the challenge has been and while we're in the midst of this chaos is getting accurate and real-time information as things change multiple times a day. And so we've been working with our state agency partners, with local governments as well around kind of the impacts, understanding the impacts. We've had a challenge of understanding again what at any point in time, there's having access to the federal payment systems. And, at first we couldn't, our departments couldn't draw down the money that they already expended to provide critical programs and services than we could. And then at the end of last week, it was a couple of payment systems wouldn't allow us to do it, even though Michigan was part of a court order that, blocked, it was an injunction that provided injunctive relief to states to continue to have access to those federal resources. So we've been very focused on being able to provide accurate information, timely information on what's actually going on. As I mentioned earlier, our rainy day fund, again, largest it's been ever, but it's still not enough to fill that gap. And so depending on how and what types of cuts there are, I think it's going to mean real impacts to not only groups like yours, but the people you serve.
Chair Anthony?
I will say yes. I will only add if we are just looking at the numbers, right? And I'm going to look at Kyle. I'm going to look at the chair to keep me honest. I'm going to look at Libby. Did you introduce Libby earlier? Libby's great. Libby's with the with the budget office as well. The lion's share of our federal funding goes through the Department of Health and Human Services and the Education Department. So when we talk about reducing federal funding to Michigan, that is a direct line to people. That is a direct line to our ability to help senior citizens. That is a direct line to make sure that people have the health care that they need to survive. That is the ability for us to educate the next generation of Michiganders. And so if we look at where the federal funding and potential cuts would come from, it would be a direct impact on Michigan families. And so because budgets are moral documents, in a world in which we no longer can rely on those federal funds, we will have to make it up somewhere, just like you do with your budgets, either your nonprofit's budget or your family's budget. If you spend a little too much money on red bottoms and you go on that trip, guess what? The rent's coming due. You'll still need to eat for the rest of the month. And so I just wanted to make sure just to name where the majority of those federal funds come from, because it isn't much of this isn't the money that we play with or money that is a nice to have. These are funds that directly impact our neighbors and our friends and our family members. And I think that's a strong consideration. And the last thing I'll say is these federal funds are our tax dollars. These are dollars that we pay into to make sure that we get a return from those dollars. So I just want to make sure just to level set those types of conversations, because sometimes we just start to just say stuff, but naming the things I think are really important, especially in a world in which people just say a lot of stuff and it's not rooted in anything real. So.
Thank you for that. I echo those concerns, but in our very recent past, we saw what the COVID shutdown did, in particular to our nonprofits. The need continued to grow, and you really didn't have any resources, and you were kind of left behind. I long advocated to make sure that we shored up our nonprofits because I think you do an incredible service to so many in the delivery of service that we couldn't deliver to the people of Michigan without you. So we need to make sure that we are protecting your efforts and working closely. I often refer to it as noise, especially during the silly season of elections. And we have to work hard to shut out the noise and understand, get back to the basics. It sounds so simple, but sometimes it can be quite challenging. But I know I have very good partners at the table this year, and I think I can fairly say that we are all committed to make sure that we're doing right by the people in the state.
So census data helps inform federal programs and provide crucial support to our communities, but only if we get the census count right. Miscounts, either under or over counts, can lead to communities not receiving their fair share of funding for programs like food assistance, early childhood education, health services, road funding, and many, many more. And the amount of money from these programs is very significant. Michigan received about more than $10 billion in census-guided funds in fiscal year 2022. And philanthropy and the nonprofit community know how high the stakes are, and which is why we get involved in the work. So how do we partner with our state policymakers to ensure an accurate count? Chair Bolin, would you like to go first?
So thank you. The census is extremely important, absolutely. But I think that we need to be identifying along the way. We shouldn't wait for every 10-year period to be looking at this numbers or how we approach it. The majority of my district is in Livingston County, and before that I came from Wayne County. And there happen to be growing communities, right? And we did something called mid-decade census. So I think educated and working in partnership with our locals on things that they can do. But now is the time, before the next census gathering time, is how can we approach this? Do we have ideas for it? How are we tracking people to help, I think, change a bit of the process? We know we all struggle with it. The other thing is that we have to really be mindful of the federal government has a way of changing lots of ways of recording, and what we've seen is this expansion of urban areas that aren't really urban, right? And the need is greater in some of the urban areas, but when we get out to the ex-suburban areas and we're counting those, like being mindful of some of those policy changes that have a residual consequence or effect on some of those areas that are great need. And then the rural areas also have a different set of needs, right? So just finding what that right marriage is, but we do have to be mindful of the policy changes because they can have a really great effect on environmental things, the social programs, just about everything we do and the dollars coming in from the federal government.
Chair Bolin is absolutely correct. I will add on and say, show me the money. I remember being one of the champions for the last census. And this was in the height of the pandemic, in which we partnered with the nonprofit community, state government played a role. I remember partnering with Carrie Ebersol Singh at the time to encourage people to just fill it out. And it requires a little bit from every one of our communities. I remember growing up, when we got that knock on the door from someone with the census, we ran. We thought, we don't give the government our information. It was a stigma behind what does that actually mean. And it constantly takes people from the respective communities, whether it's rural or urban areas, to speak the language, to have those trusted relationships, just to get people to fill it out. And that does require resources. So in addition to an analysis of the policy levers, we're also making sure that we have financial resources to support organizations on the ground that can ensure we get an accurate count.
I'll just share quickly as I see the 1 minute sign in the back that like Chair Anthony said, like those are our tax dollars that are going to Washington that we want back here to serve Michiganders. So as she mentioned, we continue to partner with organizations, both public and private, around the educational piece. Working with our school systems, working with local governments, articulating the importance of why filling out the census is so important, not only for that day and for those dollars, but the supports and programs that ultimately come from those resources that come back to Michigan. So we want all that money that's ours back so we can provide supports to Michiganders.
Okay, I'm going to take a little bit of grace here and just ask all of our panelists to, knowing all of the different priorities that we have in this room here, what is one thing you think that we all can agree on? Chair Bolin?
We're here. We want to serve the people.
I think we can all agree that our most precious resource are our young people. Our next generation of Michiganders is where all hands on deck.
As a former school social worker and deputy state superintendent of schools, I think education is the key, and the types of resources, programs, and services that your organizations provide to students both in and out of the classroom is a place where I think we can all agree there's room for growth and need there, and want to work together to expand those opportunities.
I just want to thank all three of our panelists for being here today and for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom with everybody in the room. So thank you, Kyle. Thank you, Chair Anthony. Thank you, Chair Bolin, and congratulations on your appointment.
I'm excited to be here helping the nonprofit sector break down silos with our partners in government, because not only is today MNA Nonprofit Day at the Capitol, but it's also February 11th, 2/11, 2/11. It's 2/11 Day. And I'll just take a moment of privilege. Our work and a big promise of making sure that no matter when, no matter where, citizens can get connected and get help, it relies on all the partnership and the involvement of all the work that you do. So if you haven't connected with 211 recently, check out our work at mi211.org. I know this is being broadcast on Detroit PBS's Facebook page later today. For anybody watching at home, if you're struggling with somebody and you don't know where to turn, you can call 211 and seek help from all these great organizations in this room today. With that, we are turning to a panel conversation with a couple of legislators who know how to get things done in Lansing, and I will let both of our partners introduce yourselves here. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm State Representative Greg Van Workum. I am on the Lake Shore. I live in Norton Shores, but my district covers Spring Lake, Grand Haven, and Port Sheldon, almost to Holland area. I have been a state representative. I'm entering my 4th term, but I've been around the block a little bit longer than that. I did 8 years working for Bill Huizinga as his district director. During that time, I actually served on the United Way of the Lake Shores board for a stint there. And then prior to that, I was out in Washington, D.C. and did about 8 years for Congressman Pete Hoekstra. So I've done pretty much the gamut of political stuff. I've seen pretty much every iteration you can do between Republicans and Democrats and who controls what chamber and the executive branch. Know the DC side, know the state side. Here I am serving on the Appropriations Committee. I'm going to be the chair of the Medicaid Services and Behavioral Health budget. Also will be on Laura Diffs, as well as GenGov, and there's another one. LEO, Labor and Economic Opportunity. So last time I was both on the policy and the appropriation side. This time I decided that I wanted to get back on the appropriation side, as I see it has a lot more meaningful impact on our communities and how to help people far more directly than the policy side. And as you kind of heard from my career, I've done a lot of public service. I believe in public service. I believe it's noble career choice, and this is the way that I've seen it, and I felt like this was my abilities and how to do it. So I've been fortunate enough to run and be successful now for 4 times, and look forward to serving this term.
Hello, my name is State Representative Christian Grant, and I serve Grand Rapids and a small part of Wyoming, so West Michigan, and I am entering my second term. So really excited to be continuing work in Lansing, and really honored to be here today. My roots, my very first job right out of college was in nonprofit work. I worked for United Way and actually did a couple stints at United Way, returned to run our Schools of Hope reading program for a while in Grand Rapids, where we had about 14 schools that we did tutoring and working with people to get children to get to that third grade reading level. And so nonprofit is really where I kick things off. And Grand Rapids, we like to say we are one of the philanthropy capitals in the country. So nonprofit is really the heartbeat of a lot of what happens in Grand Rapids. This session, I'm really excited to be serving as the Minority Vice Chair for our Economic Opportunities Committee, as well as serving on Reg Reform and Transportation. So I'm really excited about those appointments because after my nonprofit work, I jumped into entrepreneurship and really leading with the heart and the mind of service that I saw during my work with United Way and other organizations. I also worked at Art Prize, helping to run that art event for several years. And I saw what public and private partnership could do when done right and when done with people in mind. And so I brought that mindset into entrepreneurship. And I also bring that mindset here to the Capitol. So although my work has really taken an economic development lens, it is really how can we use the resources that we have to better serve the people that I represent and to allow people to have more access to opportunities. So my goal is to increase the quality of life for the people that I represent. And that is something that we do in partnership together. That is something that we do by bolstering the work that you all are committed to every day and pairing that with the resources that we have here at the state level. So just really excited to have a conversation today and to talk about how we can work together. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. We did not plan the United Way connection, but thank you for that. And we're very grateful for the work that it takes to play the roles that you do here in the legislature. And I should also mention that both Representative Van Workum and Representative Grant are leaders within the nonprofit caucus that MNA has helped organize. So thank you for your work on that as well. Everybody in this room here is interested in influencing the decisions that both of you and all of your colleagues make in the legislature. And there's all kinds of advice for how to be a good advocate and an informant of legislators. Call or email or share stories, share data, all different kinds of almost I see them as false either ors, when really the most important thing is inviting you to be a part of our work that we believe in and care about so much and building a genuine relationship. So my first question for both of you is, what do you really want to hear from nonprofits in your community? And what does building a real relationship with nonprofits as legislators look like to both of you?
I'll take that one first. I think the main thing is we know that government can feel really unapproachable at many times, but just like in your offices or in your friendships or at home, when you build a real relationship with someone, that is really how you get things done. And so we hear from some people only when something is wrong, only when they want something. It is very much like, hey, you work for me, do this right now. And it's like, well, we could have talked a year ago, like when things were okay and helped, but coming to someone in crisis mode actually ties our hands. That's when we're least able to help because something has to happen right now. So I know that a lot of nonprofits are small and you guys are fulfilling many roles in your titles, but if you can find a way to build a relationship with your legislators, with our staff ahead of time to just say, hey, this is the work that we do. Here are the things that we're doing well. This is what I just sat down with someone yesterday. They just came to my coffee hour. I have an open coffee hour every month. They just popped up. It happened to be a lull in the coffee hour, and he gave me his whole spiel. He gave me what's going well, and hey, just so you know, in the next year, this might be something that we have to chat with you about. And now I'm prepped. Now I know. I was able to say, hey, call this person, or this might be a good connection for you. So we're still humans, and relationships honestly still run everything, and we know that. But for some reason, government makes us behave differently, but it's still the same.
Yeah, I guess just kind of add on to it. Representative's correct. It's all about that relationship and building that relationship and building it prior to a crisis situation, right? That's why we do a lot of district visits of going to nonprofits, learning about what they are working on, how they fit in the grand scheme of nonprofits, what's that niche that they are helping with and making a difference with. It's kind of similar to when I visit small businesses or manufacturers, getting to know that person, getting to know that, having that relationship so that when something comes up, it's not trying to build that rapport right from the start. And it is that face-to-face, and it's kind of probably like your donors, right? I can tell you I go to a lot of nonprofit annual dinners, which is basically your fundraiser, and you're giving the presentation, you're giving the story, you're pulling on that heartstring, but you're also giving the data of this is what the money is going for, this is how many people that we're serving. So it's kind of like that, to try and simplify it in a way of when you're giving your presentation to your donor, it's kind of the same with a legislator. So invite us to your annual dinner so we can see what you're doing and meeting the people that you're helping and meeting also your board members and the people that are running the organization. That's just helpful for us. You don't have to come to Lansing to have a meeting. We do meetings pretty much on Mondays and Fridays in the district, so don't feel like you have to come to DC to have that meeting. Invite us over, show us what you're working on, who you're helping. That's how we get more ingrained of how it fits rather than the next meeting that lasts 15 minutes in Lansing as you're booking and booking, going to see the location, going to see the names and faces. Really helps put a story to it, as I'm sure you guys know and do. It's kind of like approaching us the same as you approach one of your donors in a way.
Thank you. That's great advice. And can we get a quick show of hands? How many people in this room have met with your state legislator or your congressperson in your district or invited them to see your work? All right, that's pretty good. Next year, we want to see everybody have that hand up in this room. It's a great experience. They get a lot out of it, and you do too. So thank you for that advice, guys. A little more fun. What's the most fun or the most creative way that you've seen somebody raise an issue or educated you about something in your community, maybe that you weren't aware about before or that got you on board? Because we're great at being creative as nonprofits, and we'd love to know what sticks out in your minds.
So I'm going to reach deep in the memory bank on this one. I know I look youthful, but I've been around for a while. So one of my first jobs was actually in Washington, D.C., and it's a position known as legislative correspondent. So I was basically a letter writer, that I would have to respond to every form letter that was sent, every individual letter that was sent. So been getting a lot of different things. And we were out in D.C., a major issue, this was, I think, during the George W. Bush era, was the donut hole. This is a pharmacy benefit plan related to Medicare, and has changed. And what they did was they sent all the congressional offices donut holes. So you got the twofer, right? You're bringing up and you're feeding staffers. So it was an interesting way to raise an issue and show the advocacy of sending the member some Dunkin' donut holes to highlight the issue of the donut hole rule in Medicare.
I will say that one of the issues that stands out most to me is we have been having a big conversation here in Lansing around auto no fault and auto no fault reform, and having families visit the Capitol, having children who have been in car accidents visit the Capitol and tell us their stories, and for us to see the quality of life that they have and how the decisions made here in Lansing impact them. That has probably been one of the most impactful conversations that we continue to have, and that I don't forget when we are having these policy conversations. And so, you know, it is sad that sometimes people have to also show their pain to move policy, but that is also a part of the conversation. And I can say, this did not happen to me, but maybe one of the most ineffective ways that I've seen people lobbied was there was a colleague of mine who was actually a yes on an issue, but somehow it was translated that they weren't. And so a big group showed up to his house and picketed, but he was not there, just his young daughter. And that moved him from a yes to a no. And I share that to say, that relationship, right? If they would have had that relationship and someone could have just called him and said, hey, where are you? Can we answer any questions for you? Before the rally cry went out all around the state to show up at his home, their issue probably would have been passed. And that, you know, it was heartbreaking to see him move to a no, but also understandable when your daughter is crying at home and calling you like, Mom, Dad, where are you? There are a bunch of people outside yelling. So we can use advocacy in ways that move the needle, but can also harm the cause if it's not done right.
Thank you both for showing both sides of that coin. And if an idea strikes you as something really powerful and impactful, you know, it just might strike a legislator that way too. But keep in mind that relationship building aspect of this, and remember that they're people too. We don't control as nonprofits, you know, who gets elected into our districts. Sorry, we don't contribute funds to your campaigns, and you know, we don't make endorsements. But we know that whoever's serving in our district, that, you know, we have to find a way to get the work that matters to us in their mind. What advice do you have for nonprofits who, you know, are working on an issue that might not be at the top of their legislators' agenda, you know, which is okay, there's a lot of important issues, but what advice do you have for nonprofits who, you know, might need to speak across party lines in either direction, and just speak to somebody who their mind isn't exactly where their nonprofits is on an issue?
I think first and foremost, education. We don't know everything. We have to know a little about a lot. And so you all are the experts, and education helps. The representative also spoke about data. I'm a data person because it's really hard to prioritize what is important when your inbox is full of hundreds and thousands of messages. But when people can show me direct impact to the people that I serve, and this is how we are helping the people that you serve, improving their lives, and this is what happens if we're no longer able to do that. Because we have such a short amount of time, cutting to the chase very quickly is helpful. And even though it may be something that was not on my radar at all, it will quickly become important when you can show me how important it is to the people that we represent.
Yeah, I'll just add to some of that. There's a difference of maybe not interested in the issue compared to being opposed, right? That you're trying to get them to be a champion. Bluntly, we can't be a champion for everything. We have so much bandwidth, so much time, so many issues that we're dealing with that we just can't be everything to everybody. And I know it's frustrating because you have a passion. There's a reason why you're joined that organization. You have a passion for that, but may not be my passion or the member that you're serving. But there's a lot different. I serve on appropriations, so I don't spend much time on the policy side. That's why I need to have that relationship and know about that issue should that issue come up, that I have a resource if I need to ask a question, or already have some of that education, as the representative was saying, that that you can be prepared for it or have an understanding of it. But you know, there are also instances that, as I was saying, we don't have the bandwidth or champion. A lot of us come into office with a directive or with an issue that we are passionate about and want to spend that time on. But then you find from your district that there's other major issues that need to be addressed, and that's just having that relationship, having that connection. When I first came in, my issue was childcare. And I worked on childcare for my first 2 years, was successful in getting the Tri-Share program established. But there was also this other undercurrent issue that was going on, as I talked about, was child mental health. And it was an issue area I didn't know much about, but it seemed like every time I had a meeting, child mental health would come up. It's like, well, we've got a real issue here that's not being addressed. So then I found a lot of my time was then put on that. It wasn't, again, something that I came in thinking I was going to do, or but it was one that, you know, groups just kind of got behind, and I could see that it was an issue that was really having an impact on families and my constituents in West Michigan. And now I'm the subcommittee chair that deals with behavioral health, and it's an issue that I'm familiar with and have dealt with, and is certainly a broad one, and it could take your entire time of that you have in the legislature to spend on this and try and solve it, but we'll keep taking a chunk out of it, I guess, is the way to approach it. So it's different, but again, it's the education. It's not giving up, but it's also finding another champion as well. It may not be your rep or your senator, but there's probably a champion here that has a relationship with your rep or your senator that they can talk to and kind of move the needle as well.
Thank you very much, and I'll take that to plug, you know, Michigan Nonprofit Association, whatever associations might lead the sector that you're working in, they can be partners with you in helping find who another champion across the legislature might be for that issue. In your minds, looking at what you think might be moving later this session across these next 2 years, work that you know will probably have to happen, what do you two want to hear about from nonprofits this year? What issues can we be educating you on from things that we're seeing in our work?
I guess I'm going to speak mostly on the appropriation side. I believe you had the chair in here prior. From our perspective, or Republicans' perspective, we appreciate, as the representative was saying, the public-private partnerships. There's just very limited in the grand scheme of what the government can do and government can do efficiently and effectively. That we believe that nonprofits who have much more touch to the people that they are serving do a better job. So that's why I've been involved in this caucus the past 2 years. Is I believe there is a significant role to play for that nonprofit sector and how to then fully, how to fund that and do it appropriately, that it doesn't just become a function of the government, but you still have your donors, you still have that buy-in from the community that you are serving. I get frustrated sometimes where all of a sudden these great nonprofits that are doing so many good things then become reliant on a federal grant or a state grant, and that's how they continue. And that's a way that many of them end up failing because that money is no longer available, or there's been a shift or something like that. So still having that connection, and then how do we work with you to make sure that you're delivering those results and helping the people that, in the end, when we come to Lansing, that's what we want to do. We want to help people. We have different ideas of how you do that, and we debate those ideas. But in the end, we're trying to serve people and how the best way to serve people.
Yeah, over this session, I'll be honest, the conversations that I've been having lately with nonprofits are a little tough. And it does touch on things that the representative mentioned when it comes to funding and other things. And so the message that I've been sharing to my nonprofits is to keep my office informed, to make me aware of struggles that they're seeing, the uncertainties that they have. I don't have all the answers, and right now, no one really does. But to know the problem and to share that not just with your legislators, but also with the people that you serve is going to be really important, so that people are aware of what's going on and that we're able to pool resources and share opportunities. You know, I'm hearing from many of my partners who are receiving 2-sentence emails that's just saying, no, we promised this, but it's not gonna happen, right? And what is that domino effect? Will it really happen? Will it not really happen? What is that domino effect to the people that we all serve? And that's a big question mark right now. But what can't happen is that we silo ourselves and we don't talk about it, or that we close our doors immediately. And that's the conversation I've been having with people. Until the work has to stop, until the work can no longer happen, we shouldn't just give up. We shouldn't walk away. It's not easy. But there are children, there are families, and this goes beyond organizations that serve these niche communities that are being targeted, but they go to organizations that help family and children and people in general. And so we have to keep helping people in our communities, especially at this time where we are with the economy and so many other things, until we can no longer do that. And that's easier said than done, I know. And I know that a lot of you have more questions than answers, but my office doors are open, and I know that for so many of my colleagues as well. We're at the state level. We can't make decisions at the federal level, but we are here working to try to preserve the services that you all provide. And you know, I also know that there aren't only questions about the people you serve, but yourselves. Will you still have an organization or a job? And I don't want to, you know, get in the weeds, but I don't want to leave without addressing that and saying, we hear you, we know that, and we're trying to work together to figure out what that looks like for our communities.
Thank you for your honesty. We know that, you know, no matter what happens over the next 2 years, there are some deep issues in our society that are going to remain, that we've all been founded to work on. You know, I have the privilege to work with the Alice Project. We know that by a conservative estimate, over 40% of households in our state are struggling with those basics. So thank you for your honesty. We appreciate that. I believe we have time for one question from the audience, and there isn't a microphone to pass around, but I can reflect the question back so the folks at home can hear that. Does anybody have a question that you would like to ask our nonprofit caucus champions?
Hi, my name is Bridget. I'm with Kids Food Basket in West Michigan, and both Representative Grant and Representative Van Workum are representatives for districts where Kids Food Basket is, and I just want to say thank you to both of you. I just want to take this opportunity. You both really show up, right? Like, it is so, I think, promising, but also just you're both a great example of what a government nonprofit partnership can look like. And I really appreciate that from both of you. So thank you for showing up and for having such good relationships with your nonprofit partners. For both of you, where do you think that nonprofits right now can lean in more, right? Where would you think that given the changes that are happening at a federal level that are going to come through the state as well, where would you like to see nonprofits lean in more and potentially even have deeper collaborations?
I was going to say that deeper collaborations will be necessary. There are nonprofits that have, a laundry list of things that they do, and that might not be possible right now, but there are certain things that are your expertise that you do really, really well, and that you can collaborate with other people to do the things that they do really well. We can be sharing, because a lot of times we're serving the same people, right? We're serving the same families, and there does become this thing, right, where we are like, well, we do all 10 of these programs, so we're going to continue to do that. But given the resources and things that we have, we may need to become true experts and true collaborators with other organizations.
Yeah, I think that's a question that you kind of think more locally of the issues facing your community, which is absolutely different throughout the state. I know the representative has worked a lot on like affordable housing, right? That's certainly an issue that's happening in West Michigan, of an area that could use some more nonprofit rather than, I think, more nonprofit rather than government coming down on it, of trying to come up with a solution that way. But then I think about the question even a little bit more broader, and maybe the numbers have changed before, but it's the next generation of people that are engaged, right? The next generation of whether it's a donor or a volunteer. And I think that's from my time on the United Way board, and then I was board chair of my Christian school. We continue to rely on the old guard and just could not activate the new donor or the new champion or the new advocate. I think that's kind of a struggle of how are we going to pass this on and make sure that the nonprofit remains a part of this, that they are part of this sector that's going to keep our communities great. I think that's something that a lot of organizations struggle with, but is much needed.
Thank you very much. And I know those younger donors, I think, are donating more and more to political campaigns, so we might be taking some of your donations then.
Ours are not deductible.
Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your wisdom. Can we give them a round of applause, please?
I just have a few closing comments that I want to bring things back to. As we close today's programming for Nonprofit Day at the Capitol, I do want to extend my heartfelt thank you to all of you that are here in person. I've had a chance to interact with many of you, and I look forward in the remaining time to do the same. We also appreciate those who are watching online. Thank you very much. Your presence is a testament to the passion and dedication that Michigan nonprofits bring to their communities. I want to acknowledge once again, nonprofits are facing challenging and difficult times. However, stealing from Donna's keynote, we have been here before, and time again, our sector will continue to show up. We are a beacon of light and hope. Those were also in her remarks. And just to make sure, in case there's been a lot of time since she spoke till now, just a few friendly reminders. You all have superpowers. You all have superpowers. We all have the ability to control our narrative, to tell our story. We need to do this in a collective voice. This moment is calling for the unification and collective voice of the sector. Don't forget about your everyday advocacy. I know many of you are going to go on this afternoon to do advocacy with your reps and others that you are set for meetings today, but don't forget about the everyday advocacy that you do. Remember, there's an offense and a defensive strategy, right? She emphasized that as well. I believe we are all being called to action, and we need to remember to do this with precision and unification. If you haven't already, I encourage you all to join M&A's Advocacy Network. You can do so by going to www.mnaonline.org. There is strength in numbers, and together we can amplify our impact and ensure that the nonprofit sector continues to thrive in Michigan. I'd also like to thank our panel speakers, also Donna for her keynote, and joining us today, also the policymakers who took time out of their very busy schedules to be here as well. your commitment to listening, understanding, and working alongside us to challenge and to face the challenges our sector has are invaluable. Now more than ever, it is important that we continue to speak, again, with one collective voice. Thank you again for being part of this important day. I look forward to all of the work that we will do together in the coming months. Lastly, a big thank you to all of our sponsors who supported us and made this nonprofit day possible. Many of you have been supporters throughout the years, and some of you are new, and we are so, so grateful. We could not do things like this without your support, so thank you so much to our sponsors. Also, one more quick shout out to staff, two staff members in particular, Joan Gustafson and Annie Hamady. These are our policy people. If you have not had a chance to meet them or interact with them, we just want to make sure to give you all a special shout out. Thanks for keeping us on time today too, Joan. So, I want to make sure to remind you to follow M&A on our social media, on our YouTube channels. It's really important. If you're not also subscribed to our newsletter, make sure you are getting our newsletter. That is where we are continuing to keep you up to date, up to speed on any resources and information that we have. So please make sure that you are also following us there. Thank you all for coming, and we wish you safe travels ahead of that Michigan snowstorm. Safe travels back.